Hey guys, I just want to bring up an opportunity for resource investors. If you want to rub elbows with the big wigs and talk to companies directly that are handpicked by Rick Rule, well, you got to be in Boca Raton from July 7th to 11th for the Rick Rule Symposium. The event has become a premier event in the mining space, and they're going to have some pretty big speakers like Robert Friedland, Sean Rusin, and the great Rick Rule. And also, we're going to be there. You can meet the deep dive team in person. So if you're interested in rubbing elbow with some of the biggest heavy hitters in junior mining, check out the link below. Good afternoon, everyone. Today I'm chatting with Greg Beischer from Alaska Energy Metals. In this interview, we discuss the recent momentum in the price of nickel, as well as Alaska Energy Metals, what the plans are for this summer's exploration program, and what investors can expect out of the company. All right, everybody, enjoy the interview. Greg, thanks so much for joining us today.
Hey, my pleasure, Steve.
So the price of nickel hit a 9-month high this past week following instability in New Caledonia, an island nation that is the 5th largest supplier of the metal globally. Do you think pricing could be sustained here?
I think it certainly could be sustained and probably will continue to rise in the coming months.
So copper's finally seen a bit of price appreciation. Not sure if you've been following that, but this seems to be more related to mine closures and protests, which are becoming trends across the US and the West. What do you think needs to change to reduce all the opposition that exists in the mining world to prevent things like what happened with the Cobre Panama mine that First Quantum had?
Yeah, I mean, there's problems in a lot of spots. Here in America, it seems to me there's still a bit of a disconnect. The administration is very strong on electrification, but it hasn't necessarily developed the policies it needs in the regulatory environment to promote mine development domestically. You know, it's something that needs to be done. Nobody's asking to relax any regulations, but what we do need in the United States is more efficient permitting with timelines for a response, so that a project proponent gets a yes or a no in a timely fashion, and we can get to work if the answer is yes. So, you know, with that's coming, but there's problems all over the world, as Cobre Panama points out, and other places in the world. So, you know, I think we've got the metal super cycle coming, the one that many, including me, have been predicting for a long time. I think it's finally arrived, and it could really kick into high gear because of shortages and problems in various places in the world.
So speaking of permitting issues, let's talk about Alaska. We got the Pebble project, which was shut down last year due to the EPA concerns over salmon fisheries. And then we got the Ambler project that was also shut down to environmental concerns. And there was some opposition from local native corporations and tribal organizations. Do you think that Alaska has those same issues that we're seeing around the world, or do you think that these are very specific situations?
Alaska generally as a state, you mean, or our company?
Like, yeah, as a mining jurisdiction, do you think that Alaska, it has those same types of headwinds that we're seeing in places like BC or say Panama or all these other places in the world that we're seeing mines really have a hard time moving forward?
It really depends on your location within Alaska. I mean, this is a huge state and there's variability from place to place. Certainly overall, Alaska is a very pro-resource development jurisdiction. And certainly Senator Murkowski of Alaska has been pounding the table for well over a decade now that the United States as a country is quite vulnerable to supply chain disruption for strategic and critical metals, and that Alaska is a great reservoir of these metals, and that we should be promoting the mineral potential of our state much more. And so it's great to have her leadership on this. As far as specifically in Alaska, there's places that are sensitive and problematic and more difficult to permit. And salmon often is a hot button topic. As you know, we have huge runs of salmon that come up the big rivers to the small rivers to the creeks to spawn. And if you're going to be trying to permit and build a mine where those fish are spawning, you're going to have a hard time. Fortunately for our specific project, there's no salmon on the project, or for that matter, for maybe 100 kilometers downstream because of natural obstructions. So that should make permitting a lot easier for us. But nevertheless, no project in Alaska seems to go unchallenged by lower 48 environmental groups. There's always some challenge, but I view our project as being highly permittable in a very good location near existing infrastructure.
So let's talk about Alaska Energy. Just this past week, you picked up a project in Quebec next to the Anglers property. Why Quebec? Is the company somewhat maybe focusing a little bit more on Quebec now, or was this just sort of an opportunity to get an asset that you found really attractive?
Well, it's a very similar story. I think you'll recall that the Nikolai project in Alaska is one with which I had a long history because of my early career with Inco, which at the time was the largest nickel mining company in the world. But for a while, I was also stationed in Quebec and did a lot of studying on nickel prospects in that province. And I've always loved Quebec because it's such a pro-mining province. It really gets it, and it really goes out of its way as a jurisdiction to encourage and promote exploration. And as a result, there's some excellent incentive programs. We can raise flow-through financing, and we can get some really attractive rebates. And so the reality is we can explore much more cheaply in Quebec than we can in Alaska. And again, it was a target of opportunity, a place that I knew something about from my early career. And quite intriguing prospects there. It's an earlier stage project than Nikolai, so we're moving it along through the first phase of exploration right now.
The last time we had you on, we discussed the 8 billion pound nickel resource you guys put out for your Eureka project in Alaska. What's next in terms of the project's development?
Well, first to be clear, Steve, as a qualified person, geologist, I'm not allowed to combine inferred resources with the higher confidence indicated resources. So we've got 3.9 billion pounds of nickel contained in an indicated resource and 4.2 billion pounds in an inferred resource. So you can do the math. You've already done it. It's over 8 billion, but technically I can't combine them. But nevertheless, it's a very sizable nickel deposit. The grade of the indicated resource is around 0.29% nickel equivalent. So not really high grade compared to the rich deposits, for example, at Sudbury, but very continuous, very homogeneous mineralization, which major mining companies love. When they can see multi-decade mine life and know just what they're going to get with out of the ground with every day of mining, then that'll be very attractive to them. And further within that resource, we've clearly identified that there is a higher grade core zone that comes right to surface. And there's probably a decade of mining right on that core zone that would be at substantially higher grades and therefore able to pay back capital more quickly. And so I think the economics will bear out.
So I think the part of the big problem with junior mining is I look at what you guys are doing and you have this big project. It's really exciting. For whatever reason, we have the nickel market is I suppose we have what's happening in Indonesia. That's sort of the elephant in the room that we have to discuss. That is got a lot of investors sitting on the sidelines saying, in order for this to work, we need to see some sort of government regulation that's going to come in and say, we want to see automakers use class 1 nickel. Do you think that that's like the big part of the conversation when you're talking with institutional investors, that you have to sell them on the idea that there's a catalyst coming where there's going to be some sort of regulatory event that's going to focus OEMs on class 1 nickel?
Absolutely. You see it coming already. For example, some of the tariffs that have been placed on metal imports and restrictions on metal imports. And for example, some of the incentives that consumers are being given have strict. So if you want to buy an electric vehicle, you can get subsidy, but the manufacturer has to assert that the metal components come from places, free trade countries that have environmental and human rights regulations that are at least close to ours in North America. So there is some already between so-called clean and dirty nickel, and appropriate. I mean, I haven't been to Indonesia, but I've seen videos and pictures, and it's really quite shocking what's going on there, and counterproductive to the idea of driving electric vehicles to prevent carbon from going in the atmosphere, because they're burning massive amounts of coal to generate the electricity to make the power to refine and smelt the nickel. So we've got to get away from that. We've got to draw a line and use metals that are compatible with the notion of preserving the atmosphere.
So last question for you. If I'm a shareholder watching, or I'm following the story and I want to know what's happening over the remainder of 2024, what am I looking out for? I assume we're going to have drills in the ground. There's going to be some exploration results. What am I looking out for?
Yep. Three main outcomes should come out of our summer work. We'll drill several holes at the Canwell prospects at the Nikolai project. And you'll remember that we've got some really compelling targets there where very high grade, massive sulfides are exposed at the Earth's surface. We've done geophysical surveys over these sites that show that there's probably high-grade metal in the ground. And so we'll test that theory by drilling a series of holes. And, that could be an absolute game changer for the company. High-grade nickel deposits of scale are really hard to come by, but when a company discovers them, there's usually a really big payday for shareholders. So we've got a shot at that this summer. Second, we will drill a couple of holes to extend the Eureka deposit further to the southeast, focusing particularly on that higher grade core zone that we've delineated. By doing so, we'll expand the size of the deposit, but at the same time increase the grade. And that will help with early stage economics. Finally, we'll complete the first round of metallurgical testing, determine how much metal can be recovered from the Eureka deposit, which will also be an important consideration for the economics of extracting the metals. So those will be the three main outcomes from a relatively modest budget for this year.
Well, Greg, thanks for hopping on here, and hopefully we can have you back on this summer to discuss the results. I always appreciate chatting with you, and I think that this is an absolute no-brainer of a project when we have those regulatory events that do happen, and suddenly the retail investors who were early on these names are going to be very happy that they were. because you're absolutely right. It defeats the purpose of electric vehicles if we're just going to end up screwing up the planet by using dirty processes for making these metals. So thanks very much for hopping on here, and please keep coming back here on the future as we get some more results and updates to let our audience know what's happening.
Yeah, Steve, if I may, just one final comment about that. And, you know, the United States is really vulnerable on security of metals supply chains. And that's why the Nikolai Project in particular should be really attractive and supported by our government. It's a domestic source, secure supply of these really important metals. And you know, the government is being supportive. They're offering grants to exploration and development companies, and we've certainly applied for those. We've seen some companies get grants that are measured in tens of millions, even hundreds of millions of dollars. So we've applied. It's a process. It'll take time, but some of these grants would be completely transformative for the company, and it will allow us to accelerate all of our activities here in Alaska. So we're hopeful to receive news about those sometime in the near future in the coming months.
Well, good luck with that. And as a shareholder, I will keep my eyes on that news, because obviously that sounds like the best type of cost of capital you're going to be able to raise.
Exactly.
Thanks so much for hopping on here, Greg.
Thank you, Steve. Bye.
All right, everybody. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this interview, please smash that like button, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Also, let me know what you think in the comment section. Thanks, everyone.